because hormones are not a root. They are not a root cause. What is a root is blood sugar, inflammation, nutrient status, your gut health. So we really take a look at those roots, and we also take a detailed look at your diet.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Natural Womanhood Podcast. I'm your host, Grace Emily Stark, Editor-in-Chief of Natural Womanhood. I have a really exciting episode planned for us today. I'm joined in our Riverside studio by nutritionist Ginny Noce. Ginny is a women's health registered nurse and certified FEMM fertility awareness instructor with a master's degree in human nutrition and functional medicine from the University of Western States. You might know her from her Instagram handle, the Women's Health RN. Named after her private practice, where she, alongside her team of nutritionists, dietitians, and nurse practitioners, help women uncover the root causes of symptoms like PMS, painful periods, acne, chronic fatigue, cravings, chronic digestive issues, PCOS, endometriosis, infertility, IBS. She does it all. She'll fix you, Ginny will, her team. Personalized nutrition, cycle charting, advanced lab testing, and restorative reproductive medicine. I actually encountered Ginny at, I think for the first time at the FACS conference in Pittsburgh last year. And we've been involved with some of the promotion that's been going on around getting better information out there around restorative reproductive medicine. So that's going to be a big focus of our conversation here today, how what Ginny does really plays into promoting overall health, getting to the root cause of things, which are, the hallmarks of restorative reproductive medicine. So with a compassionate and evidence-based approach, Ginny and her team help to empower women to understand their cycles and optimize their metabolic and hormonal health through diet and lifestyle. Her mission is to educate and support women in becoming active participants in their hormonal and overall health journey. And we're so excited that she's here with us today. Thanks for joining us, Ginny.
Oh, I'm so excited. I think we're having a really good conversation.
I think so too. I've been just dying to ask you so many questions since I met you in Pittsburgh last year and started following your Instagram, which is phenomenal. If anybody doesn't follow Ginny yet, I highly recommend follow her at the Women's Health RN on Instagram. She just gives such great information there. And that's where you really run a lot of your business, right? Is that where you get a lot of your clientele and
Yeah, so I think that's definitely where I started out. So my Instagram, my friend in college made it for me. She was like, you have all this information, like you need to put it somewhere. And I was just like, I don't really want to do social media. Like I wasn't about it. And so she actually made the page for me and like we did it together. And then like she kind of stopped doing it. And then I like overcame it. And then it was like, and then it turned into, I was like Ginny Fitty for a little bit because I was a personal trainer in college and I like always did like nutrition. And then it born into the Women's Health RN when I was like, hey, everyone kept asking me questions like, hey, like what are all these nutrition hormones? And simultaneously, like throughout my career, I guess you could call it a career. I don't know. It's my life journey, whatever. I was working for FEMM, became a certified FEMM instructor, had all this deep understanding of endocrinology, and then went and got my master's degree in nutrition. And then, naturally I was just like posting everything I learned on there. And then people were like, can I work with you? And I was like, I had actually never wanted to do a private practice. And I remember distinctly telling my boyfriend, who is now my husband, but boyfriend at the time, being like, I never want to do a private practice. Sounds like so much work. Like I just want to work for someone. And then it just kind of took on its own, whole thing, this whole journey. And so then it just kind of happened really naturally and got to the point where I could quit my job and do it full time. And then now in the past year, I've hired 4 different practitioners on the team. And it has just been, it's just been the Holy Spirit led from here on out. So it's been really cool because as you know, and I know, and probably your listeners know, there's such a need for this work and restorative reproductive medicine, but then also combining the functional medicine, nutrition aspect onto that. And so I really found myself in this little niche
Mhm.
of people desiring functional medicine, but also restorative reproductive medicine. Cause I kind of say it's not always the same. So
Mm.
yeah, so basically all that to say is right now it's Instagram, but it's also word of mouth. It's podcast. I'm overwhelmed right now with the amount of client applications and just discovery
Wow.
calls I get. I'm like, my mom, who's like a marketing person, she's like, you need to be tracking where these people are coming from. And I'm like, I don't have any time to track. It's like just me. Like it's just me. And I'm like, I have no time to track. I just have to keep up with helping these people first and
Yeah.
foremost. So, which
Oh,
is great. It's a wonderful problem to have.
yeah, very good. Well, so I want to talk about what you just said about what this functional nutrition approach is, because that I think it's like one of those things that if somebody said it to me, I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that is. But then if I had to actually describe it to somebody, I don't know that I could do
Mhm.
that. So let's talk about what that is, how it differs from like a conventional nutritionist approach,
Mhm.
and how it's different from, but goes hand in hand with restorative reproductive medicine.
Yeah. The main like graphic you'll see used in functional medicine, I have a few graphics like I think on my Instagram page, like a few posts that I've done. But really, functional medicine lies on identifying what we say is the root causes of illness, or conditions, rather than just treating the symptoms, right? Because
Mhm.
the conventional medicine, and I would say a little bit of restorative reproductive medicine, is a bit of identifying and diagnosing the issue and then a treatment based on that. Whereas
Mhm.
functional medicine kind of reverses it. It's like, okay, well, what is your diagnosis? And then we're going to dig really deep actually to find the roots of that. So,
Mhm.
what you'll see on the graphic is like a tree and then like the roots of the tree. So,
Mhm.
what at the roots are going to be like your gut health, your hydration, your nutrient status. So, not just nutrition lifestyle, but deeper than that.
Mhm.
Right? Again, your nutritional status, your blood sugar, inflammation, oxidative stress, gut health, spiritual health. It's a whole body approach,
Mhm.
and really looking at those different root causes and then how those can be contributing to both the symptoms or the diagnosis. So, did I explain that well? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really clarifying. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so what would be like the conventional nutritionist approach then?
I guess I would say I don't want to dog on. I'm not a big like hating on people, and I would say that, I know what I do. I
Yeah.
would say I'm not 100% on what they do per se.
Yeah.
But I would say they give kind of very general nutrition advice, or a lot of dietitians are in hospitals doing like medical nutritional therapy.
Mhm.
So kind of like, if you have like chronic kidney disease, we're going to decrease protein, kind of more of like very advanced, like again what you would kind of do in like the hospital type of nutrition.
Mhm.
And then there are of course dietitians in private practice, but all I can speak to is that I have dietitians asking me where my training is from, so I know they're not doing what I'm doing. They're
Interesting.
not really learning. They're not learning the functional medicine approach. So my master's degree is in nutrition and functional medicine. So
Uh-huh.
it was partnered with the Institute of Functional Medicine, which is kind of, it's like the father of functional medicine. So it really teaches like how to look at again those roots and how to be addressing that. So for example, if you're having like chronic loose stools, or like fat, kind of it looks like grease in your stool, we're trying to be like, hey, you're probably actually not digesting your fat. And then what are we actually going to do to improve your bile flow? What functional foods can we use to
Mhm.
support that aspect? And they're not really trained in those ways. And again, I can't really speak to what they're taught because I kind of don't understand how you can be, how you
Yeah.
could not like nutrition is functional nutrition, but yet
Yeah.
they're not being taught these things. And then, of course, they're also kind of being taught the nutritional guidelines, which is I don't follow the American nutritional guidelines per se. I'd say there's definitely, some universal principles that we can all take from that, but
Yeah.
I'm not being trained in that perspective as well. So again, I don't want to. I don't want to hate on anyone or saying they're doing anything bad. I can just say that they're not taught to interpret lab work. They're not taught to really look at those roots of the tree. They're not taught like advanced understanding in like gut health, hormones, and how to use a functional medicine approach to address those things.
Yeah.
So again, I can just speak to, I have a lot of dietitians in my inbox asking me, can I train them or what did I do?
Yeah.
So that would be my answer.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great answer. And I wasn't asking from a place of like, what are they doing wrong that you're
Yeah.
doing right kind of thing. But like, just from a practical perspective, somebody
Mhm.
listening, they're like, and they're wondering like, what if I'm looking for a nutritionist, if I'm looking for a
Mhm.
dietitian who I really want to be taking this approach, what signals to me that they are doing that? So maybe
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about that more. Like what are some of the, I don't know, either buzzwords or different tests or different things that
Yeah.
somebody wanting to find someone who does what you do should be looking out in a prospective dietitian or nutritionist?
Yeah, I would say one that is now kind of depends on your goals. So, right, we are really specialized in women's health, kind of on, we don't do perimenopause. We're really in the childbearing years
Yeah.
of women, PMS to, what you would be diagnosed in those childbearing years, PCOS, endometriosis, infertility, those things. So I would really look for someone who is specialized in your issue. For example, you wouldn't want to come to us if if you have ulcerative colitis or Crohn's. We don't specialize in that.
Mm.
So a mistake that I've seen is that, there's just dietitians taking on everyone under the sun. And, I would say maybe you do know everything under the sun, and that's amazing for you. Can I learn from you? But what I've seen is people go to a general dietitian for fertility. They know nothing about hormones or hormone
Mm.
physiology, and
Mm.
that's where our team really shines, understanding hormones, and understanding how nutrition is going to impact that, or how your gut health. So, for example, how a gut infection like H. pylori could impact fertility. Right. So I'd say number one is, looking for someone who, distinctly seems to specialize in what your area of concern is. And then number two is you don't have to use functional testing to necessarily be a good nutritionist. I think there's, how I put it is there's different ways to skin the cat.
Mm.
In my personal work and journey is that I do think a lot of functional medicine tests are not regulated. They're very new. So determining the reference ranges and if you're determining a whole protocol on a test, that is like, you want to make sure that test is very accurate, right?
Yeah.
So I have been really weary of implementing too many functional medicine tests in my personal practice.
Yeah.
I really focus on blood work because it has been around for so long. It's very
Sure.
validated. And we have a lot of research of saying if you do this dietary or supplement intervention, you get this result. You see this result in the blood labs.
Yeah.
So, part of my other professional journey is also sharing what I know with other physicians and healthcare providers. And part of that is that I do need to be evidence based. So I don't want to just be taking this functional medicine test that I can't show how our intervention, I can't show a study, right? Um,
Yeah.
so that's, a big thing in just my personal practice. You'll see different people using functional medicine tests. And I would say I could talk 2 hours long about all the different tests and like
Yeah.
pros and cons. But we really are doing blood work and then a GI map with our clients. And the GI map is um, we're looking for like underlying infections, microbial imbalances, how well you're digesting your food. I always say, if we're going to tell you to eat all this good food, you better be digesting it well, or right, there's no point.
Yeah.
Um, like for example, food sensitivity tests, if you ever heard of that, those are
Mm.
extremely inaccurate in the research. So to me, anybody who's
Really?
running a food sensitivity test, you do not know the research, and that is not someone I would use personally.
Oh,
So
interesting.
that would be, a red flag for me if someone was using that. Um, but I would say like if they're predominantly focusing on like blood work and a GI map stool test of there's different companies, but one that's kind of just looking at more so like, is there infections, microbial balance, are you digesting? Those are pretty accurate. And then the other test that you'll see a lot of functional medicine people use the Dutch test. Have you heard of that?
Yeah. Yeah. Like a
And
dried urine
yeah,
something. Yeah.
exactly. And so yeah, it uses urine to look at the hormone metabolites. So basically your hormones can, I won't go into the science of it, but I use cycle charting because that
Yeah.
is also the benefit of being in a lot of functional dietitians are not certified fertility awareness instructors.
Yeah.
And that is a big difference. And because I have that training from when I worked with them of really understanding how to look at the hormones and blood work, same with
Hmm.
them, going to the facts and, going to these NAPRO conferences, or I'd say, conferences, learning more about NAPRO's approach and
Yeah.
just, a lot of research and connection with those doctors and providers. Um, I can understand so much about hormones looking at
Hmm.
someone's chart and getting blood work on the right day of the cycle or
Yep. Yep.
and using those right ranges. So at this point in my practice, I have never found the need to run a Dutch test
Hmm.
because if I look at the cycle, I look at serum hormones, it tells me most of what I need to know. And also, hormones are just chemical messengers. So if they're off, we still need to ask why. So
Yeah.
it's really hard for me to say, hey, spend $400 on a Dutch test
Oh
for
my God.
to me to tell you the underlying imbalance, or sorry, to get say what is the hormone issue, and then for me to still ask why.
Yeah.
You know, I've
Yeah.
had someone, they weren't cycling and a doctor ran a Dutch test. I'm like, why would you run a Dutch test if you're not cycling? I can tell you your hormones are either low or you have elevated androgens that are preventing you from cycling, which we can see reliably in blood work. Right.
Right.
So,
Right.
to me, I would, I just would never run a Dutch test right off the bat, in
Hmm.
my personal opinion. Maybe in a very extreme case, if like you're just really not getting anywhere, then maybe, yes, you could maybe run a Dutch test. But those are some things that, that's I've done a lot of research to really try to determine what do we want to prioritize in testing.
Hmm.
So, and then from there, what we also do nutritionally, I really developed this approach also just say based on my own clinical experience of working with restorative reproductive endocrinologists myself and not getting the
Uh-huh.
answers that I want. I've worked with naturopaths, I've worked with chiropractors, and I've worked with other functional medicine doctors, and everyone was missing the mark. And
Hmm.
so our approach just really came from what I found of what to be missing in these approaches. So when it comes to diet, we're not just focused on what do you remove, because that's mostly what everyone will focus on. Like, don't eat the sugar, don't eat the dairy, don't eat the gluten, do this extreme elimination diet.
Hmm.
Very rarely does anyone tell you how to structure your meals, which that was like one of the biggest changes in my health journey, is like actually how to structure my meals, meal spacing, what foods to actually be really including, how to just eat in a balanced way so you can have a cake or cookie here or there with not losing your mind or your
Hmm.
sanity, and still be healthy. Um, and then also to, again, what are your deeper underlying issues? And then how does that fit in the overall context of your diet and what we can change
Hmm.
based on that? So it's really, really personalized. And I'm a really big fan of coaching as well, because what I've also seen is people will get these really lofty protocols from a functional medicine doctor
Yeah.
and they can't do it long term. And
Yeah.
your health is dependent on what dietary patterns you can continue long term. So
Yeah.
that's a really big focus of ours, as well as making sure that, I'm definitely going to ask you to work. It's not just going to be like, oh, you can eat cakes, cookies all the time. It's like, no big deal. We're going to ask you to cook, learn to cook, but we're going to help
Yeah.
you through that. And how can we make that tangible in your life? And that looks different for each person.
Yeah.
So we've just really developed this approach out of, number one, seeing the mistakes that is happening in the industry, because they say that there's now big wellness, I think is what they're saying, or something to
Yeah.
that effect.
Hmm.
And I don't want to be part of that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be part of that money grab. I don't want to be part of any money grab. I just genuinely want to help people, and do that in the best way with the most integrity that we possibly can.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many. I'm gonna have to like think through what I want to start off with and everything that you just said, what I want to pick up on and explore more. I think I've heard so much about the Dutch
Mhm.
test over the last several years. That's been kind of like one of the hot things, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's absolutely fascinating that you're like, nope, just chart your cycles and do blood work on the right days. Like, so simple, and not at all
Yeah.
$400, right? Like, that's incredible to
Yeah.
me, and it makes perfect sense because, it's just, I think it speaks to the fact that there are probably a lot of big expensive tests that could be thrown out the window if we just taught women how to chart their cycles and taught doctors, nutritionists, what have you, the importance of doing blood work on like your patient's peak +3, not telling them this like 14, 17, 21 nonsense, right? Like
Hmm.
actually getting the right blood draws on the right days to assess hormonal levels and different things based on individuals' menstrual charts. Like
Yeah.
that's huge to me. Like that's just like a mic drop to me. I love that. And I've heard, I have a friend who's a family practice doctor, and he is really big into nutrition.
Hmm.
And he has said in the past, I think, like, don't bring me, like, don't go get all these expensive tests and bring them to me or bring them to another doctor. Chances are we're not even going to be able to really read it, understand it, or know what to do with it. Like, let's just get
Hmm.
back to the basics. Let's teach you how to cycle chart. Let's get some good testing around your specific cycle. And it doesn't have to be expensive stuff. It can be blood draws, which are fairly inexpensive.
Hmm.
And you don't even have to have like doctor's orders to get blood tests. I learned
Yeah.
that recently. Like you can show up at a lab and it's your right to like get blood
Hmm.
drawn. You need to have somebody to, read it for whatever it is you're looking into. But
Hmm.
I don't know, that kind of blew my mind. Somebody told me like, you have the right to go to a lab and get your blood drawn. Like you don't have to have
Yeah.
a doctor's orders for that. And I was like, oh, okay. That
Yeah.
actually kind of makes sense. It is my
Which is
blood.
cool. So yeah, we order blood tests and we can get like an at lab cost. So like for example, we run like I believe it's now 30 markers on our blood lab test, and it's $300 for that panel, for us. If you were to take that and like you didn't get it at cost, you ran it and insurance didn't cover it, it would probably be over $2,000 to $3,000.
Oh,
Um
wow.
yeah, so that's
Wow.
also, there's a lot of, obviously we could go into like that whole world, that's a whole lot of nuances.
Mhm.
But I'd rather blood tests, you can get so much more information. So we look at blood sugar imbalances, inflammatory markers, certain nutrients that can be reliably tested in blood, like zinc, copper, iron, magnesium.
Mhm.
um, we take a look at hormones. So I'll actually do cycle day 3, 4, or 5 hormones, because that's femmes, and I'll also be looking at their chart though to kind of determine luteal phase dysfunction to potentially suggest low progesterone. And I
Yeah.
will say too, just about the Dutch test, I'm not saying it's not accurate. I'm not saying it's not cool, because it really is. But in my practice, I just need to justify where someone's spending their money,
Yeah,
right? I just,
absolutely.
it's really, really important to me. And again, if I felt the need, like if I was not getting results in my clinical practice, then maybe I would, think about doing a Dutch test. But I haven't needed to,
Yeah.
because when we really take, again, because hormones are not a root, they are not a root cause.
Mm.
What is a root is blood sugar, inflammation, nutrient status, your gut health. So we really take a look at those roots, and we also take a detailed look at your diet. So for example, I had a client, I'm about to actually see her today. She's a very complicated case. She's been to naturopath, functional medicine doctor. Yet I just took a look at her diet lifestyle like journal, and she's like tried all these elimination diets. And I'm like, I can just tell you right now, your meal spacing is way too long. You're not getting enough protein at meals. You're still not eating enough nutrient dense foods, despite you're eating clean, but you're still not
Mhm.
eating enough of the right things.
Yeah.
There's an infection going on in her gut that no one's found. And she's always had chronic constipation and bloating, yet no one has taken a look at what's going on in the gut. She's not
Mhm.
digesting her food well whatsoever. And I'm like, how have you been to like 4 other people and no one's done this yet? Truly, it blows my mind, because I always tell people I am not a rocket scientist. Like, I don't do like, I am not, I mean, I'm smart. My husband's like, you're so smart. But, I'm just like, I just would not consider myself like I don't know. I just wouldn't consider myself like a surgeon, like, super, super smart, but I'm just like, how are these foundational things being
Yeah.
missed? It just
Yeah.
blows my mind every day. One of my best friends has had chronic health struggles to the point where she could not walk. She was using a wheelchair. Went to a functional medicine person. They try to detox her,
No.
makes her worse. She's been tested for Lyme's, every autoimmune disease under the sun. I've worked with her for 3 months, and she went from feeling at a 2 out of 10 to a 7 out of 10 in 3 months. And we've literally just focused on diet and lifestyle, because
Wow.
no one has focused on, are you eating enough of the right things, how to structure things, how can we move in a way that's not going to stress your body out, just foundational stuff. And
Hmm.
that's where I'd say the functional medicine doctors, like, they want to do good things. That's why they go to look at more functional medicine stuff. But
Yeah.
oftentimes they're going to like weekend conferences. They don't go get a
Hmm.
2 year master's degree in nutrition. They're going to like weekend conferences, and they just take like what the conference says to do this test. And then, like, again, they're kind of still using supplements then as they would medication. Like, right, they're still
Hmm.
trying to like diagnose a problem, and then like, here are just your supplements kind of based on that, and like, here's like a strict elimination diet. And like,
Hmm.
sometimes people feel really great after that, and I'm not saying it doesn't work, but most of the time people either burn out, it's just like way too expensive to continue on 10 plus supplements every single month.
Yeah.
So our really big point is, we really just want to get people to a sustainable place. And just when you focus on the basics, a lot of times then you don't need to do the fancy dancy things, is
Hmm.
my personal approach and opinion. So,
Wow.
and of course, I've had complicated cases that, we do need to get a little bit more intense. Parasites are real. I've done parasites protocols on people, and they can be life changing if you actually have a parasite. But should you
Wow.
do a parasite cleanse if you don't have a parasite? No. I saw a functional medicine person say like all women with PCOS have parasites. I'm like, that's really weird, because I never had to do a parasite cleanse. Yes, I put my PCOS in remission. I've had now three, well, I'm on my third pregnancy. So,
Oh,
didn't
wow.
need, that's just, it's hard when you ask the question, like, what to look for in a person, because I don't know.
Yeah.
All I can say is that when I just focus on what I'm doing, and again, I've said this already, but just trying to practice with like the most evidence I can and the most integrity I can right now in this
Hmm.
industry of flip flops.
Yeah, and I think, that's one thing that really drew me to your Instagram was just this like really nuanced approach that you take to things because I mean, you can't follow many like nutritionists, dietitians, like health coaches without seeing them like demonize one thing or hold another thing up as like the end all be all, like, like seed oil is bad, tallow good, like, that kind of dichotomy,
Mm-hmm.
and like get all the toxins out of your life. If you're still using like, Dove shampoo off the drugstore shelf, like what are you doing? You're poisoning yourself. Like, and I've
Mm-hmm.
never seen anything even remotely like that on your Instagram, which I think is it's a credit to you. It's really refreshing. And I'm just really like I love this recent post that you did. You're traveling in an Airbnb and they only had nonstick pans, and so you were like, I'm cooking in nonstick pans this week and I'm not going to stress about it. And it was so funny because I had to make the same choice a couple weeks ago too. I was in an
Mm-hmm.
Airbnb with my husband and he was like, oh no, all the pans are nonstick. And I'm like, well, we still have to eat. Like we bought good food to cook in
Mm-hmm.
the nonstick pans at least. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just think like I'd love to hear just why you take this approach, like what kind of conscious decision, how you got to that clearly conscious decision to take this
Yeah.
approach, this nuanced approach, and then
Yeah.
what you see that is harmful about the like very hard line dichotomous approaches that so many different health influencers take.
Yeah, so I would say it came from a personal place of a lot of the noise on social media, or that really black and white thinking, was extremely triggering for me personally, and I ended up developing orthorexia.
Mm,
Just being, I could not eat a cookie without having like extreme guilt, or like, freaking out that that sugar was like going to do something bad to me, or that it was going to cause my PCOS.
mm,
And I've also, the more you study nutrition, if you're actually looking in the research, you really understand, first of all things are chemicals. Like when people are like, this chemical, like it's a chemical, so it's bad. I'm like, anything by definition, like nutrition wise, is a chemical break, it is ends up being one. So I think understanding the science has made me a lot less afraid, actually. So for example, like, oh gosh, I just saw another one. Like, I'm not a fan of Paul Saladino. He used to be like the carnivore MD, now Paul Saladino,
Mm.
because he went back on his word on he's not carnivore anymore. Anyways, I like he first of all like would be like seed oils are like the worst thing, and like quote a study that, number one, if you actually looked at the study, it was a rat study, which is not what you want to use to really back your point when there are better human randomized controls trials. And then number two, a lot of times if you look at the studies that he quotes, they don't even back what he is saying. And so that's a really scary thing on social media, is that you will see a lot of these people, if someone ever makes, if you eat this, that's horrible, that's terrible, I immediately trash can.
Yeah.
I'm not listening to you whatsoever, because nutrition is not black and white. It is extremely nuanced. And really, it is about dietary patterns, not what you do on like a singular, again, one time or 1 week basis. Again, cooking and nonstick for 1 week is not going to disrupt your health if for 80% of your year you are able to cook in stainless steel or cast iron. Right. And so people just are not understanding that basis. And also, I really think that breeds weakness in our body. Like this is quite a strong opinion, hot take of
All right.
mine.
Here's the
But
hot
if
take.
if you are consistently telling your body that it cannot handle things, what is that doing psychologically? Your brain and your body is always listening to your thoughts, right? I always say, when you see a tiger, it is not that tiger and its presence that causes any sort of physical thing. It is your brain saying, oh, that's a tiger, it's going to eat me, I'm screwed, I need to run away. It is
Yeah.
your thoughts that is
Yeah.
perpetuating a physical reaction. And so if
Mm-hmm.
you are like perpetually in a state of stress, in a state of being scared of things, what does that do to your physiology?
Mm-hmm.
So instead, I really like to turn that on its head and just really tell my body, like, it is strong, it is capable of handling these things. And of course, I'm going to do what I can in its power to eat well, reduce my toxin exposure as much as possible. But beyond that, if I continue to stress and worry about it, it is just going to be negative towards my health.
Yeah.
So a lot of this, again, has just been like that personal experience. Like, I just don't, I don't want to say resonate with those messages on social media,
Yeah.
the scare tactics.
Yeah.
It stresses me out. And then oftentimes, now that I understand a lot more things than I used to, a lot of times people who are talking like that, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know the actual research, just quite frankly. And so then I can easily be like, yeah, I don't need to listen to anything that person says. And it is unfortunate, because once you get one thing wrong, that doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong about everything,
Yeah.
but it's just going to question my ability to trust you further.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and I just don't think it's a fruitful, it's not a fruitful way to look at things, when we can, again, look at things from a nuanced perspective, and we can focus thing on like a positive way, like, hey, yeah, like, let's reduce our toxins, but like, don't worry about what you can't do. And when you get to that point of like, I just got an air filter and I'm like 10 years in on like the whole non-tox, crunchy journey. And I just got an air filter. And guess
Yeah.
what? I was able to reverse my PCOS and do all this without an air filter in my life. So I just have really found, again, clinically, that most of the time it's the very like big rocks that you're moving, like what you're eating, your main habits in your life, and the little rocks don't matter so much anymore.
Yeah.
And so yeah, a lot of people are way too stressed out. Is
Yeah.
my basic response.
Yeah.
Let's
No,
stop freaking
I
out.
hear you. I follow so many, just working for Natural Womanhood, I follow so many different health accounts and things. And yeah, it's really overwhelming sometimes, where it's just like, what actually really matters at the end of the day. And I think, um, I think I saw it might have been Lily Nichols, and I'd love to hear your
Hmm.
take on her. But I think she might have been the one who I saw put it this way, like several months ago. Like, look, like probably the biggest factor in my health is something I can't change. And it's the fact that I live next to a bunch of commercial fields
Yeah. Hmm.
where they're spraying pesticides, and
Yeah.
that's probably and people who live next to highways, people who live next to railroad tracks, like, and sometimes these are things you just absolutely can't do anything about, even though like that's probably the single biggest impact on your health. And
Hmm.
so like just kind of keeping it into perspective and not thinking that like you can control everything and just
Yeah.
needing to seed some of that, right?
Yeah.
Before you go absolutely crazy. But what, so who do you follow on Instagram, if anybody? Who do you think does kind of like a decent
Yeah.
job of getting the right kind of messaging around nutrition in particular, and
Yeah.
and women's health, nutrition and how it impacts women's health?
Yeah. I do love Lily Nichols. I think she is amazing.
Oh, good, because
She
I love her
is,
too.
yeah, she is extremely strong in the research.
Yeah.
So I really love her a lot. Lily Nichols is definitely one of my top fertility pregnancy people. I do really like Dr. Jolene Brighton, Dr. Lara Brighton. I think Elisa Vitae is pretty good. Um, I also really like, so his name is Lane Norton. His Instagram is BioLane. And he is not women's health focused. He's kind of more so weight loss focused, but a lot of people are focused on weight loss these days. And he is just really there with the science of weight loss, which has changed
Mhm.
my opinion a lot on things, just really presenting the science and a nuanced approach to things. So I think he is a really great place to follow. Dr. IDZ, he is a European doctor, and he does a lot of like what people are like the crazy buzz trending TikToks or whatever, and he'll give the actual science. So I
Mhm.
appreciate him a lot. Um, I would say women's health. If you download my free guide, Mastering Your Hormonal Health, like on my Instagram, I have a link. I did the last page of it is resources that I like. So that's just the top of
Mhm.
my head. I definitely, there are more that I like. Oh, trying to conceive nutritionist, TTC nutritionist. She's really good.
Oh yeah, I've
Um,
seen her.
yeah, she's really good. Endo fertility dietitian. She's really amazing. So yeah, in that free guide at the end of the page, sorry, you didn't download that whole guide, just look at the last page of it. I have like my favorite podcast, books, and Instagram people.
Nice.
So yeah, because I can't, those are the people off the top of my head though. So yeah.
So what I'd like to talk about weight loss a little bit, because it almost seems like, you know, you said like everybody's
Oh
focused on weight loss,
gosh.
but it's almost like we're not allowed to even acknowledge that. Like,
Hmm.
I find it really funny that different like health influencers won't even call it weight loss. They'll be like, when I'm in my fat loss stage. And I'm like, literally that's weight loss. Like nobody's hoping to
Yeah.
like what, like lose muscle. Like you wouldn't say I'm
Yeah.
in my muscle loss phase. Like it's weight, it's weight. You're trying to lose weight.
Hmm.
And so but it's so funny, like we're not really, and maybe you can speak to this as a nutritionist, especially like, do you find that people are turned off if you talk about weight loss and the importance of that
Hmm.
for certain things, like maybe for PCOS, or are people looking for like some honesty around the importance of weight loss for certain things?
I think people are looking for what works. I
Hmm.
think people are just, if they want weight loss, they want to know what actually works. And
Hmm.
I I do, this is another thing, you got me on a strong opinion. I actually try not to talk about weight loss too much because it's such, I'm just like I'm not ready to like push buttons, but I will. So here's
Uh-huh.
the deal. In the research, it's calories in and calories out. I'm sorry that, people really want to say that that's not true. It's hormones, da 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 da. No, it's calories in, calories in. That is basic thermodynamics of the body.
Mm.
Now, where the nuance come in is if you have insulin resistance or blood sugar dysregulation, if you have excess fat tissue, you will have leptin resistance. And so basically what these things do is that it hijacks your satiety and your hunger hormone. So leptin is
Right,
your satiety hormone. If you have excess
right.
adipose tissue, you can have leptin resistance. So, you can't intuitively eat. because you are going to be more hungry than actually what your body is actually needing because of that leptin resistance. So
Okay.
it's not just as easy as like being in a calorie deficit. Like that principle is true, but what I work with clients with is that we really actually need to really dial in on how to balance your blood sugar so that you can manage your cravings to be in a calorie deficit.
Yeah.
You know, these things like optimal protein, so that actually when you do lose weight, you majority lose fat tissue, not muscle tissue.
Mhm.
You again, you know, voluminous foods to actually, you know, increase your satiety and things like that. So there's a lot of nuance to actually how to stay and be in a calorie deficit. And I have had people come to me be like, Ginny, I've tried everything for my weight loss and I just can't lose a pound. The best friend that I just talked about, she gained 40 pounds in like 2 years. And she's just like, I just can't get the scale to go down. Like I eat really healthy. And everyone's like, this is what I hear. I eat really healthy. I've tried everything. I'm like, so have you tried like consistently staying in a calorie deficit? No. The answer is like resounding no. And I
Mhm.
get it because I've also seen on social media this like rejection of like you shouldn't have to track your food, and tracking food is like bad for your health, and you know you shouldn't have to track and you should just be able to lose weight. Well, again, I'm sorry, but you do need to be in a calorie deficit. And the only way to 100% know that is if you track accurately. And
Yeah.
65% of people do not track accurately. So they'll
Yeah.
also track thinking they're in a calorie deficit, but they didn't log like 400 extra calories. And that's
Yeah.
going to make or break your weight loss. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
And it's about understanding the science of it. And again, not being like, there's such a nuance that I take to it that is also that we do want to also support the overall health of your body. So like
Yeah.
it's not just about being a calorie deficit. It is about
Yeah.
like eating nutritious food so that you can feel good. You know, so my friend, so finally she's lost 7 pounds in 2 months, and she has never seen the scale go down in the past 2 years. And we really focused on balancing her blood sugar and like fine tuning her meals and like increasing her exercise. Like
Mhm.
it wasn't anything super crazy, but like no one had really explained to her like, because she just thought she was eating clean. And that's what I'll also hear is people think because they're eating clean,
Yeah.
calories don't matter,
Yeah.
because that's what they're hearing on social media,
Yeah.
right? They're like, oh, like literally Paul Saladino just said that. He literally was like, it's not calories in, calories out. Like that's like a made up notion. It's like, really? Have you looked at the research? Because the research is like pretty clear that calories in, calories out works. And again,
Yeah.
like I said, that doesn't cover the nuance of everything, because when people go to their doctor and their doctor's like, have you tried like eating less and exercising more? It's like, yeah, most people have tried that and like they crash and burn. But most
Yeah.
people crash and burn because they don't focus on also the blood sugar balance piece of things. They don't focus on how this is also going to be a lifestyle. They don't,
Yeah.
also most people who just have weight loss as a goal, that's a really tough goal to have, because you
Yeah.
have to work day in, day out for a goal that you're not going to see for a month or two.
Yeah.
Really big goal, right? That's a
Yeah.
really hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So, you know, really you have to focus on like a lot of weight loss is psychology,
Yeah.
as well. You know, people usually don't just end up like overweight, just like being like, oh, I never cared. You know, I've never tried anything, never tried anything to diet or, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
never encountered someone who's like not tried something, right?
Yeah.
So there's just a lot that you have to unpack there.
Mhm.
But it's not helping them to tell them that calories in, calories out is not true. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah. No, I hear
you
you,
know,
and it definitely like it rings true because I did Weight Watchers in college to
hmm
try to lose the freshman 15, which was
hmm
actually probably more like the freshman 20-ish, and it worked so well. And it's because their point system really does work off of that calories in, calories out mentality, but there's no education, at least maybe in recent iterations of it there is, but
hmm
when I did it back in like it would have been like 2010, 2011, whenever it was, there's no education around like the different points with, for different types of nutrients, nutrition,
exactly.
like should count differently, right? And like at the end of the day, like it's still calories in, calories out, but
hmm
there's a really big difference between the point that went towards one thing versus a point that could go towards something more nutrient dense that's going to fill you up
Yes.
and nourish your body.
Yes.
And so I think really impactful, that just to be honest about like calories in, calories out, but
Mhm.
let's talk about the quality of the calories, and let's
Yes.
educate you about the quality of those calories that you are going to
Hmm.
fill your body with, because that can make all the difference between whether or not it's going to be sustainable and whether or not it's actually going to be bettering your health. Because I think you can, like, we all have heard of the friend, we have all done the
Hmm.
crash diet at some point,
Hmm.
and you're not better off. Like, your fertility is not better
Exactly.
off. I'm pretty confident that a lot of the root of my like struggles to conceive a few years after that initiated with the
Hmm.
crash dieting, because I
Hmm.
lost my period for like 3-4 months. And then when it
Exactly.
came back, it was never the same again. And then got married and had trouble getting pregnant. And I think I can probably like track a lot of it back to that. And so I think it's so important, like, to be upfront and honest about calories in, calories out. But then, yeah, that nuanced approach to like, now let's talk about what kinds of calories we want you to be eating to
Exactly.
support your health and
Hmm.
fertility.
Well, and a huge issue with weight loss or Weight Watchers was that they had like nuts and seeds were really high in points because they are, and
Yeah.
especially high fat foods because
Yeah.
fat's going to have more calories per gram.
Mm-hmm.
People would then be afraid of fats when fats are essential for fertility. So again,
Yes.
when
Yeah.
we are, educating our clients, like we are not just talking about calories in, calories out. We
Right.
are also talking about, also, is there a way that you can increase your body's ability to burn calories? Yes, if you increase your lean muscle mass, you can increase your body's ability to burn calories, right? So if we focus on increasing lean muscle mass, protein is a higher energy expenditure than carbohydrates and fat. So if you eat higher protein, then that's actually going to be, you're actually going to be able to burn more calories, increase your basal metabolic rate. So if we eat more protein, we do weight resistance training to increase our lean muscle mass. We get enough fiber to support our blood sugar, increase satiety, and we get the right forms of, I would say, like fiber, those fiber rich carbohydrates that are also going to provide our body with nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
There is such a, right, we can get you losing weight and pooping daily and having energy and improving your period cramps or getting your period back. I just had a
Mm-hmm.
client, PCOS client, who did not have a period for 9 years. And we got her period back. She's now had 3 periods um, by doing diet and lifestyle, and she is losing weight, right?
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
so there is a way to do it strategically. But
Yeah.
I am just about explaining the science to people and why we're going to do what we do and how we're going to do it in a way that's going to support your body. And and this is why I don't talk about weight loss on my page, because like you will not see, like, I have literally one post on my feed about weight loss.
Yeah.
And that is because personally, I want clients who want to come to us because they want to feel better and
Yeah.
they want to lose weight.
Yeah.
There are people who do not care. I've seen these people, and no offense, I'm sorry, I don't want to work with you, but I don't want people who want to sacrifice everything just to lose weight, because
Yeah.
there are people out there that want to do that, and I am not that person then for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, just like you said, there is so much nuance to it, but we don't need to lie about also scientific principles to get there as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that has been, yeah. And then when I explain that to people, they're just like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Like,
Yeah.
I'm on board. I really have not had anybody argue with me, thank God.
Yeah.
And we get results. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's
Yeah.
like I said, I've had people, they were like, they did the diet program or whatever, but they never saw if they were in a calorie deficit.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's going to make or break your weight loss
Yeah.
scientifically. So yeah, I think that's just kind of, I think that's like the way I also approach weight loss is kind of how I approach a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's like there is universal principle, but then also there is still nuance to that, right? That you have
Mm-hmm.
to unpack, and it's not as simple as it may like seem on the outside. Like, again, just, oh, eat less. Like, okay, yeah, yeah. I mean, I did the same thing. I was able to like lose 15, 20 pounds myself, but then I, had chronic constipation, actually developed PCOS. That's like a whole separate conversation. But made everything worse.
Yeah.
and so yes, it's like that principle makes sense and it works, but there's a way that you can do it that will either sacrifice your health or actually build up your health. So
Yeah. And so, like, is there a generally accepted, like, safe deficit for a like fertile cycling young woman to be in? Is there a deficit that's too much? Is there a deficit that's not enough? Where's kind of that sweet spot, or is it just so individualized to each
I would
woman that you
say
can't really
it's
say?
really, really individualized, because I do think there's a really big difference in a person who, say, needs to lose like 50 pounds
Yeah.
versus there's someone who maybe wants to lose like 10 pounds.
Yeah.
And so, um, those people who I've seen people, who again, who are, severely overweight, they don't lose weight in a healthy way, but yet
Mhm.
it gets their cycle back, because fat tissue is so
Interesting.
inflammatory to our
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
It disrupts our hormones. It is an endocrine organ, fat tissue. So it actually
Wow.
secretes hormones and can disrupt your hormone signaling. It's also very inflammatory, and it stores environmental toxins.
Hmm.
So, I've had this conversation of the GLP-1s a lot, with people, and I'm someone who is like, it is more dangerous for you to have that fat tissue on you than it
Hmm.
is for you to lose it unsafely, right?
Wow.
Again, there's a way to do it well, and like I'm obviously all for that. I've supported people in that, but I'll take a relative of mine, 200 pounds overweight, and did the GLP-1, has lost 150 pounds. Um, are they still eating great? No. Are they doing the exercise? Not as much as they should, but they are objectively in a healthier state now
Yeah.
than they are 150 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
So I think that's a different perspective than a person who is, they want to lose 10 to 15 pounds. And this is actually a conversation that I have with my women who want to lose the 5 to 10 pounds. I'm like, do we actually need to do that? If
Hmm.
you look at the research on fat tissue, the body fat percentage a woman needs to have for healthy ovulation is around 24 to 26%. If you go Google like 24 to 26% fat tissue on a woman, you will see that it's actually not very lean.
Yeah.
um, I, I,
Yeah.
I always tell people, think about their Greek goddesses. Think about
Yeah.
their Greek goddesses. They
Yeah.
had tummy rolls. They had got tummy rolls.
They did. Yeah.
Um, right? And so I do not think that women need to be very lean to be, but that's what we equate to being healthy.
Yeah.
And that might
Right.
not always be the case in some women, right? You'll see the women who are super stick thin and they can get pregnant. And then you also see the women who they actually maybe need more fat tissue to
Yeah.
have healthy ovulation. So
Yeah.
that is very individualized. You can see how
Yeah.
those are kind of way different groups of people that we're talking about. And so, I'll use another example. I have a client, chronic constipation, painful periods, irregular periods. And so we worked together, and she was like wanting to kind of maybe lose like 5, 10 pounds. And so we worked together. We've got her bowel movements beautiful. As I would describe it, no bloating, everyday bowel movements. If you've ever struggled with constipation, then you know the beauty of having daily bowel movements.
Yeah.
Um, so daily bowel movements, periods went from like to like almost pain free, regular cycles, skin amazing, but she didn't lose 5 pounds. And she's
Mm.
like, so I had to have the conversation. I'm like, do you objectively need to lose that 5 pounds? Because clearly your body is very happy with you with
Yeah.
where you're at right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if we actually drop you into a calorie deficit, could that sacrifice some of your hormonal health? Right. So we do have research that women who it can range from about a 400 to 800 calorie deficit, we can start to see cycle abnormalities in like a 400 calorie deficit.
That's
So
not very much.
it's not very much. So usually I'll
Yeah.
usually drop someone. I'll usually drop someone only by like 200, 300 calories,
Hmm.
um, is my starting place. And again, you can get more aggressive based on where someone is. Again, if someone needs to
Sure.
lose like 100 pounds, I try to put them in like a 20% calorie deficit. But that also sometimes their cravings are so strong that they cannot maintain a 20% calorie
Yeah.
deficit. So, and this is where people crash and burn, because they'll try to do a severe calorie deficit. They can't maintain it. So they just say, fuck it, I can't do it. and
Yeah.
then they don't maintain it. And I'm like, but what if we were just in a 10% and you maintain that? Your weight
Yeah.
loss is slower than you want it to be, but you're still losing weight. And I had that conversation with a client. I'm like, you can realistically stay here for a year or two. You cannot stay in that, super
Yeah.
severe state for a year or two. And,
Yeah.
again, like she knows she needs to lose like 100 pounds. So
Yeah.
we know this needs to be a a life change for her, right?
Yeah.
So again, this is also why I really have moved away from any group coaching, because
Mm.
everyone's picture is so individualized.
Yeah.
And these are the individual conversations that we need to be having with people and their health. Because two people just really might need two different things, right? But both of them signed up for a weight loss program, you know? But
Yeah.
those two
Yeah.
people need way two different approaches.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, this is all so fascinating. And we're like coming up on an hour. I'm
I
trying to
know.
figure out what do I want to prioritize in these last few minutes with you, Ginny. And maybe we'll have to have you come back because there's just so much good stuff coming out of this conversation. I really, really want to touch on something that I heard you say at an event that you and I were recently at in Washington, D.C. That just really struck me. You said, if you have unexplained infertility and insulin resistance, you don't have unexplained infertility. I can explain it to you. I wrote that down when you said it. I just thought it was so powerful. And I was like, all right, she's coming on my podcast and I have to just get her to elaborate on that for
Yeah.
listeners because I thought it was so powerful. So let's talk about that,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. So, okay. So insulin resistance, I'm like, I got to break it down for people, but essentially when you're eating carbohydrates, that's going to increase your blood sugar. And then your body's way to utilize that blood sugar in your cell to turn it into energy is insulin. And insulin is essentially like the key that unlocks the cell that allows for the glucose to come into the cell and be utilized. So what happens in a state of insulin resistance is it's that your cells are being resistant to that insulin. And then, so insulin's building up in your bloodstream, and so is glucose, because the glucose is not being allowed into your cell to be utilized as
Right.
energy.
Right.
And so, that state of hyperinsulinemia and hyperglycemia is extremely damaging, because the only cells that do not become insulin resistant are your ovarian cells. They stay insulin sensitive. And so, they get overloaded with this insulin. They can get overloaded, and they can be extremely damaged when there is this like overall in the body, this insulin resistant state. But again, your egg cells
Mhm.
are not, and they're actually being overloaded, they're being damaged.
Wow.
And then secondarily is that when you're in a state of insulin resistance, and there's a lot of research to show this too, we're just in a chronic inflammatory state. This can increase basically your immune cells to secrete inflammatory cytokines. And when people talk about inflammation, this is what they're talking about. They're talking about
Mm.
your body increasing these things called inflammatory cytokines, which can damage your cells. Well, when your cells get damaged, then they secrete this thing called oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is just a different type of molecules are called like reactive oxygen species now are being produced and are further damaging your cells. So you're just in this really big state
This
of,
cascade.
yes, cascade of this
Yeah.
damage going on. And this really negatively impacts, number one, your egg quality, your follicle quality, and then absolutely it then leads to that hormone disruption. So high amounts of insulin, this is going to be the number one cause of PCOS, is that high insulin then causes the theca cells of the ovary to overproduce testosterone, and then it decreases the conversion of its active form estrogen, or I shouldn't say its active form, but testosterone converts into estrogen. But that whole process is
Yeah.
really messed up when
Yeah.
there's insulin resistance going on. So ends up what happening, you have this overload of testosterone going on. You can't have follicular recruitment happening, and that's why you have all these stimulated little follicles on the ovary. And
Right.
that's what they're calling these cysts. So PCOS is not actually, it's not cysts. It's actually a bunch of stimulated follicles that are not being well recruited into one mature follicle ovulation. So so all that to say is that, I mean, number one, if you have insulin resistance, you likely have some maybe degree of PCOS, but even so, even if you don't, we have independent studies that women without PCOS, right? They excluded women with PCOS from this study, that if they had insulin resistance, so the one study I talked about at the conference we were at, is that these were women undergoing, um, gosh, not ART. Well, I guess
In
Clomid.
vitro fertilization,
They
IVF.
weren't going. They weren't doing in vitro. They were doing Clomid. So they were doing ovulation
Oh, okay.
stimulation. Sorry.
Okay.
100% of the women with insulin resistance did not get pregnant when they used Clomid.
Wow.
In that study. And you will see similar studies that when women have insulin resistance, and you'll see this in IVF2 and IUI studies, if you have insulin resistance, your ability to be successful with these things are extremely low.
Hmm.
And generally, and then they also decrease. You're going to see a higher incidence of natural fertility as well with insulin resistance. Because again, number one, it's going to impact your egg quality. Number two, it's going to interfere with the development and the recruitment and of the follicle and of healthy ovulation.
Hmm.
And then if you have chronic systemic inflammation, that could also impact the uterine environment. That makes it inhospitable for implantation if there is
Wow.
inflammation going on in the uterine cavity. So this is a lot of like endometriosis. There's so much inflammation going on,
Yeah.
and so and a lot of times that can make implantation like impossible for that. So
Right.
again, there are many different mechanisms that you could probably propose as being a mechanism of how insulin resistance could impact fertility.
Right.
But again, I can explain to you in many different facets of how that could be, a possible cause of your fertility struggles. And again, if that's not ruled out or looked at, and then you're being referred to IUI or Clomid or IVF,
Right.
well, we
Right.
have all these studies that insulin resistance reduces your ability to be successful with these treatments. So
Right.
why would we not address that first before we're recommending these people to these
Right.
treatments to then just spend this money to have a lower success rate?
Right.
Makes no
Or on the
sense.
restorative reproductive medicine side of things, like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, you might have so much endometrial tissue or, endometrial lesions that do really need to be excised so that your pelvic organs can move the way that they need to move again. So they're not all locked
Mm-hmm.
together by this scar tissue. Or, maybe you even need ovarian wedge resection for your PCOS because your ovaries are so huge that they're at
Mm-hmm.
risk of falling and torsing. But if we're not also addressing like the root causes of the inflammation that are linked to insulin resistance, then yeah, like what are we doing? Are you just going to have to come back for another surgery at some point? And
Exactly.
so I think that's a really good description of how like what you're doing can go hand in hand with some of these restorative reproductive medicine procedures that are
Mm-hmm.
really, really great and can be really
Yeah.
successful and really needed. But maybe are also not enough on their own. And certainly, like some of the hormone supplementation and balancing things that we see from some RRM professionals, like I can definitely see how that's not getting to the root
Mm-hmm.
at all if you're not also looking at what's going on with your insulin and everything else.
Exactly.
So that's
Yeah.
that you've really like, yeah, you've given us this whole picture and
Yes.
it's so fascinating and there's so much to
Yeah.
think about. I think the thing that I want to end with you is, like if somebody has insulin resistance, as probably a lot of us do, or suspects that they might because they have some like
Mm-hmm.
stubborn belly fat or they are having some issues with their cycle. What is one thing that that woman listening with any of those issues or all of them could do like almost immediately that would be beneficial to her health in terms of her diet? Is there like one like quick easy thing that's sets you on at least the path towards healing?
I would say the first thing we're teaching our clients is our plate method, which is filling half your plate with non-starchy veggies, 1/4 of your plate with a protein source, typically an animal protein source, and
Mm-hmm.
then the other 1/4 of your plate with a fiber-rich carbohydrate. So, not your ice cream, but more so like your sweet potatoes, those kinds of things, or fruit even. So after this, I'm gonna have eggs. And then I'm gonna have some like spinach, arugula, and like a little salad on the side, and then I'm gonna have like a fruit. So that way, my plate is structured to have fiber, which slows the digestion and absorption of your carbohydrates, so can slow your blood sugar. Protein, which can do the same thing. fat, which can do the same thing. And so you're not overloading yourself with too much carbohydrates. You're
Mhm.
getting optimal nutrients in that as well, because I think another really underrated thing in insulin resistance is that we need optimal nutrients like magnesium and potassium to utilize insulin well on the cells. And so a lot of times insulin resistance is just like, oh, lower your carbohydrates, but it doesn't actually increase your insulin sensitivity. Um,
Okay.
so number one, the plate method, and I'll give you a second thing for lifestyle. I am a big really fan of resistance training. I always say to
Mm.
people, I'm like, I think high protein is really, I don't know if you've seen that on social media, it's definitely like really
Oh,
coming
yeah.
out. I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of protein, but that's not going to build your muscles unless you do resistance training. That's a
Okay.
huge myth that I've seen, is like, oh, I'll just increase protein and I'll suddenly lose weight and have lean muscle. No, not if you do not have resistance
It's not
training.
that easy. I can't
It's
just
not
eat
that
more
easy.
steak.
You need to break down the protein and then or you need to break down the muscle, and then protein comes in to
Yeah.
build the muscle up. So you need to break it down with resistance training. So if you
Mhm.
resistance train, balance your plate, that will help. But some people, again, you need more nuanced approach. There's in the conference that I'm going to speak at for FACS in October, I have
Mhm.
14 points for optimizing insulin resistance. And that's
Wow.
and that's like diet. That didn't even include lifestyle. So
Wow.
yeah. So there's a lot to it in my opinion, and there's a lot of little hacks to it, but that's definitely give me you locked me into a box of like one place to start. But the
I
plate
did. I
method
locked you in. That
will
was
definitely
me.
get you like 3 or 4 points in there if you do the plate method. And then we can
Oh.
get always more specific from there.
Mhm. All right, fascinating, and I think that's such a great place to land for this episode with you, Ginny. Again, this has been such a great conversation with Ginny Noce, the Women's Health RN. Find her on Instagram, and thank you so much for sharing
Yes,
your time with
thank
us, for
you.
sharing your expertise and your passion. Thank you for what you're doing. Is there anywhere else, any other resources that you want to throw
Um,
out for listeners before we say goodbye?
So right now, on my if you go on my Instagram, the Women's Health RN, and the link in my bio, I have 4 different free guides. I have red flags if you're trying to conceive. I have a gut health guide. I have a postpartum pregnancy like nutrition guide, and then my really big one that has like a 30-minute free training with it is my Mastering Your Hormone Health one, where I dive into cycle charting, nutrition, and functional lab work for optimizing your hormone health. So
And
that's
all that's free.
where all of that is free.
Amazing.
I've gotten some business coaches being like, why did you offer that for free? But I'm like, listen, then if they think that's what it's free, then wait until they get into the 4 month one-on-one program. Because everything I talk about there is not even what we're covering in the 4 month program.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's where all my free guides are. And then if you go to the womenshealthrn.com, I have a blog that I'm really trying to do. I kind of forget about it, but we do also weekly newsletters there. So you can learn more about our services, sign up for the weekly newsletter there. But
Awesome.
yeah,
And
but
we'll
thank you so
drop
much for
all of
having
this in
me.
everything will be in the show notes. And yeah, just love what you're doing. And thanks for being on with us today, Ginny.
Yes, thank you so much, Grace, for having me.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the Natural Womanhood Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please drop us a review so other women and couples interested in authentic women's health can more easily find us. Also, please be sure to check us out at naturalwomanhood.org and on our Facebook, Instagram, and X accounts. And if you never want to miss an episode of the Natural Womanhood Podcast or a new Natural Womanhood article, media appearance, or our latest educational content and programming, please be sure to sign up for our newsletter, which can again be found at our website, naturalwomanhood.org. Thanks for sharing a part of your day with us, and we'll see you next time.